Humans are innately curious. Had I been born 10 years later, I would have probably been diagnosed with ADD. My good friend, who is a speech therapist, loves to remind me of this every time we're talking and I'm distracted by something. My grandmother was exactly the same. In conversation with her, she would always embark upon a new tangent before finishing her current thought. Layer upon layer of conversations. A chat with her was like an unstable dream in Inception. For me, it's because I find everything to be so intriguing. Everything is so interesting and worth exploring now. Of course, this makes me quite distracted. It takes me triple the amount of time to complete a task that it would take somebody a bit more focused. More than ever, we are faced with unabsorbable amounts of information. I mean, how often do you feel like you wish your brain were a sponge that you could squeeze and just let it breathe for a bit? This begs the question, of course, with so much for our mind to absorb, what are we allowing it to? And this is where curation comes in. Our minds are continually curated. They begin by being curated by other people, and then slowly, over time and to different extents, we take on the curation of our own minds and lives. Imagine yourself as a museum. You spend your life collecting art and objects for specific purposes. You could be lazy and choose to sit back and allow any two-bit artist to approach you to sell you their pieces, claiming to be the best around. Or you could be smart and actively seek out the best artists themselves. The best artists aren't necessarily the best salespeople, and vice versa. You might eventually choose to pass some of your items on to another museum. Or you could sell several of your items to acquire one larger, more valuable piece that'll be the pride and joy of your collection. Think of this as giving up several small pursuits to follow one larger, more time-consuming challenge. The exhibitions will shift and change based on the trends, or you could choose to go against the trends. You might even lend a masterpiece to another museum, thereby enriching their experience with the knowledge and joy that it brought to you. As the years go by, you'll buy and sell different items, but your permanent collection defines who you are. Curating isn't just about collecting or deciding which pieces to buy, sell, store, lend, or throw away. Most museums have basements full of items in storage. Think of the closing scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. And most museums also employ at least one collections manager and one curator. Both are highly educated, very experienced in their field, and can spot an authentic artifact a mile off. But while the collections manager is tasked with the preservation, the curator is the one who tells the story and is usually better paid. The curator brings the pieces together to form a coherent exhibition which takes you from start to finish, and in which each piece, from the most insignificant to the most valuable, finds its rightful place. The curator is the owner of the narrative. Curating curiosity is about feeding our life narrative. It's what turns our stores of experiences, thoughts, and memories into a living, breathing collection. It validates or excuses our past, it describes our present, and offers an insight into what's to come. Feeding our collection isn't the issue today, it's overfeeding, that's the problem. Quantity is not quality. And while some might say that this is a millennial issue, it's also relative. How do you think our parents or grandparents felt when they sat down in front of a television for the first time? So, if filling your collection isn't the challenge, then curating it is. Finding the right narrative is the difficult job. With millennials, some might say that you either hate them or you're one of them. Now, this isn't so much a reflection of us as people, but rather the frustration that people with a certain mindset feel at our lack of wanting to pursue traditional routes, be they paths concerning sexuality, education, religion, lifestyle, or work ethic. Our lack of conformity understandably upsets some of those who all too easily forget that they too frustrated their elders. Our resistance and restlessness has partially arisen from the fact that it's not as easy anymore to follow these paths. Our parents were the first post-war generation where the most basic form of survival wasn't an issue. The notion of being able to play carefree, to study hard, to live a long life, to have a career, retire and die without raising your heartbeat was wonderful. And then we came along, born into a society that encourages us to study hard, to buy a house, find a life partner, and live a healthy life. Only these norms, which were set during the past couple of generations, are harder to attain today. We're having to relearn and reforge what it means to lead a normal life. I was recently at a conference where one of the guest speakers was an expert professor and researcher in the field of resilience. After he had finished speaking, we were invited to ask him questions via the conference app, and then these questions were upvoted by the other attendees so that the most relevant or popular questions got answered. And the top 2 questions were from clearly frustrated high-level management lamenting the lack of resilience, so they said, in the younger members of our workforce. Rather than seeing change as inevitable and using it to their advantage, they were trying to fight it. Now, we're the generation that went from cassettes to Spotify. We're highly adaptable. Okay? We, as millennials, are altering the social fabric of the world. We're less likely than previous generations to identify with religions and with political parties. Identified by our lack of attachment to institutions and traditions, we're likelier to change jobs more often. Yes, the paycheck at the end of the day is important, but ever more so the purpose that brings in the cash. We younger generations are hungrier for a life with meaning now, as opposed to feeling safe in the knowledge of having an afterlife. Everyone's different, yes, but most of us are driven by the pursuit of happiness, whatever that means to different people. I know that I'm in a constant state of flux between wanting to give my mind a break when I feel like I'm drowning in social media and excess connectivity, and then feeling restless and in need of a challenge and an adventure when I finally do get that break. But to bring back the museum metaphor, is freezing our collection when we feel like we've got it right the answer? No, of course not. That would make for a static and potentially boring exhibition. So is social media counterproductive for curating our collection? If so, why is it so integral to any job in the creative industry? The negative view of social media was recently put under the spotlight with the surprises for many of us that were spring hunting in Malta, Brexit, Trump, Brangelina. But many of us, while we feel worldly and connected, we're actually just swimming around in our little goldfish bowl. To quote a biblical phrase I often heard as a child, if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it far away from you. Harsh words, yes, but the essence is correct. It's useless lamenting existing within an echo chamber if you're not going to do anything about it. Now, deleting Facebook is a pretty hard ask. I personally can't do it because of the industry that I work in, and I won't do it because it allows me to keep in touch with the friends I made when I was living in London. It's also how I conduct my social life. But my eldest brother, as well as several friends of mine, have banished themselves from Facebook, and conversations with them have changed. I'll often tease my brother because he'll share a meme with me weeks after it's died down. But then, when I talk to him, I do notice how conversations tend to circle around slower journalism and meatier topics. He's more in control of his curation. Now, being on Facebook does not mean that you are destined to be a witless weed. But without wanting to, you're likely to be surrounded by people of your same background, education, and mentality. Your old circle of friends are wonderful, and they will be there until the end. But how much will they actually teach you? They won't challenge your beliefs, and you won't expand your mental limits. Wouldn't it be better if we all surrounded ourselves with different people of different ages whom we admire and respect? People who could teach us something. People who would challenge what we hold to be the truth. People who are different. And people who we shouldn't be friends with. Your education shouldn't end when you leave education. That's when it should really begin. It's not about switching off. It's about switching on, investing. investing in the time, the effort and relationships that we need to help us reflect, discern and be mindful about which pieces should make it into our current exhibition and how long they should stay there. From there, we can decide which pieces make it into our permanent life exhibition space. Seeking out new people and experiences is important, yes, but so is balancing the new with the mundane, if only because the mundane allows us to step back and reflect. And the more we do this, the better we get at identifying the best pieces. It's the combination of the old and the new, the volatile and the mundane, the reflection and the blind embrace. This allows us to curate our curiosity, elevating us from a collections manager to a curator. This takes us from individual pieces to exhibition, from a collection of memories and thoughts to a narrative of our life that we can enjoy yesterday, today, and for the rest of our lives. So after a lifetime of curating your museum, what will your museum look like? Thank you very much. And thank you, Ted, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.